At 6:47 on November 3, 1944, Private First Class Michael Donovan crouched low inside the wreckage of a ruined bakery in Metz, France, peering through a fracture in the crumbling wall as German positions materialized out of the morning mist. He was 22 years old, 6 months at the front, credited with 14 confirmed kills, and he had never once spotted an enemy sniper before being fired upon. Metz had been turned into a fortress. German defenders had carved the city into more than 200 prepared firing positions, each capable of taking lethal aim at advancing American troops. Donovan served in the Fifth Infantry Division as a counter-sniper, find enemy marksmen and eliminate them before they could pick off American soldiers. The task was straightforward on paper and mercilessly difficult in practice. Donovan's weapon, an M1903 Springfield, fitted with a telescopic sight, could place a bullet accurately at 800 yards. Training was not the issue either. He had graduated at the top of his sniper class at Fort Benning. What kept killing American snipers in Metz wasn't guns or training. It was the German technique known among the enemy as the double position. 2 firing sights separated by 30 to 50 yards let a sniper shoot from one spot and disappear to the other before the Americans could triangulate. The German method meant they always fired first. Donovan needed 12 to 15 seconds to find a target in his scope, judge distance, wind, and fire. The Germans already had their shot lined up while he was still searching. By early November, Metz had already cost the 5th Division 23 American snipers. Men who were supposed to be the best marksmen in their units, yet died in the very way their skills should have prevented. Donovan's first partner had been Corporal James Bradley, a Nebraska farm boy with an eye for moving game. Bradley had 9 confirmed kills and 3 weeks beside Donovan when a round struck his head through a factory window on October 18th. The bullet was a 7.92mm Mauser, fired from some hidden aperture 400 yards away. Bradley fell instantly, and Donovan never glimpsed where the shot had come from. His second partner, Private First Class Robert Chen, from San Francisco, lasted 8 days longer. Chen's steady hands and sharp sight earned him a dozen kills before a sniper's round pierced his chest on October 29th. Chen lingered for 40 minutes as medics fought to save him, choking on his own blood. Again, Donovan later found the enemy position, but found only empty rubble. The shooter had already moved. The pattern was brutal and relentless. American snipers set up, searched with their scopes, and were killed by distant marksmen who fired from angles they weren't looking at. Command's answers were the usual: move often, change positions, make use of concealment. But none of those orders addressed the fundamental asymmetry of view. Donovan watched every engagement with a microscope-like attention to detail and grew obsessed with the problem. How do you notice the threat that's not in your narrow field of view? The scope that magnified his target also narrowed his world. An 8-power optic reduced his visible angle to roughly 8 degrees, like peering through a tiny tube. He could see far, but not wide. Anything beyond that slender cone was invisible, a blind spot that clever German snipers exploited by taking flanking angles. The more he studied the engagements, the more Donovan realized that while he scanned forward, he could not monitor the arcs behind him. The enemy shot first because they had already been watching him. The solution came from an unlikely place: his shaving kit. Inside was a small rectangular mirror, about 4 by 6 inches, metal-framed and scratched from travel. In the dark of November 2nd, Donovan sat alone in a quiet corner of the ruined hotel that his unit used as a billet and thought through a dangerous idea: mount the mirror so he could glimpse behind without breaking his sight picture. It was a reckless plan. Altering government equipment without authorization could mean severe punishment. Reassignment at best. dishonorable discharge at worst. But Donovan had watched Bradley and Chen die. He could not accept being the 24th name in that long list. That night he gathered tape salvaged from signal wire, a small knife, wire cutters, and the mirror. He worked by flashlight amid shattered plaster and glass, using improvisation rather than ordnance. The Springfield scope sat about 3 inches above the barrel, clamped by steel rings. Donovan experimented for 20 minutes to find a place where the mirror could be seen in peripheral vision without blocking the sight. Too high meant he'd have to lift his eye. Too low would intrude on the sight picture. Too far forward ruined the angle. The right spot was the left side of the scope, angled at about 45 degrees and 8 inches ahead of the eye. His hands trembled as he wrapped padding and mounted the mirror. Strips of tape around the frame, tape around the scope tube for grip, repeated passes to prevent slipping under recoil. Twice the mirror fell and clattered. Each time he restarted, heart pounding, aware that any patrol or officer might find him mid-modification and report him. After 40 minutes the mirror stayed. He peered through the scope, practiced a glance left, and for the first time saw a frame behind him. The doorway, the hallway, the street arc. The crude device added almost no weight and did not alter the zero. It was visible, obviously field-made, but it worked. Peripheral vision while aiming down the sight. It was 4:50 when he finished. At 6:47 he walked into the bakery and took up position by a cracked oven on the second floor. His partner, Private Sam Martinez, covering the doorway. Martinez, 19 and fresh to sniper work, noticed the mirror and asked what it was. Donovan answered simply, "To keep you alive." They set up a shooting rest from broken furniture. The fog was lifting and across the street the factory's ruined facade came into view. Windows blown out, floors collapsed, perfect hiding places for enemy snipers. Donovan brought the factory into focus at 8 power. The field through the scope narrowed to a thin slice of distance, but the mirror sat in his peripheral vision, reflecting the street and buildings behind. At 7:23, Donovan saw motion, a dark shape in a damaged third-floor window. He steadied, calculated range, roughly 410 yards, checked wind, saw the shadow again. Before he squeezed the trigger, something flickered in the mirror. Movement in the third floor of the building behind them. A rifle barrel, the glint of a scope. It was the very flanking shot that had killed Bradley and Chen, a man already trained on Donovan's position. Without breaking his aim or lifting his head, Donovan whispered to Martinez, "Sniper behind us, third floor, left window. He's on us now." Martinez moved, found the flank shooter, and lined up his Garand as Donovan counted them off. "On 3, you take the one behind. I'll take the factory." 3, 2, 1. The Springfield cracked at 410 yards. The German in the factory pitched forward, hit in the chest. Martinez's Garand barked from behind them. Another German slid from his window. 2 shots, 2 kills, 5 seconds in total. Donovan worked the bolt, ejected brass, reloaded, checked the mirror. No more movement behind. They were clear. Martinez stared at the mirror and at Donovan, astonished. "You need to put that on every rifle in the battalion," he said. Donovan shrugged. He'd done it to survive, not to be praised. Word spread quickly. That morning, Donovan's team eliminated 6 enemy snipers over 4 hours without a casualty. By nightfall, 3 more teams asked for similar mirrors. Donovan installed the first batch of modifications himself. Crude mounts of tape or wire, sometimes leather straps. Each varied by materials, but all followed the same principle. A peripheral reflector to reveal flanking angles. Sergeant Frank Wilson tested one and declared it perfect. A Montana hunter before the war, Wilson had lost partners to flanking shots and was grateful for anything that might keep his men alive. Within days, the practice propagated across the battalion. By November 12th, 9 rifles sported mirrors. By mid-November, the modification had become standard among sniper teams in the sector. The effect was measurable. In October, the sniper casualty ratio in Metz favored the Germans. For every Allied sniper killed, the Americans took down only half a German. By mid-November, the ratio shifted dramatically to roughly 4 German snipers killed for every American lost. German commanders noticed the change. Their reports spoke of Americans engaging flanking positions and countering before German marksmen could fire. They tried longer ranges and simultaneous attacks from multiple positions, but paired mirror-equipped teams nullified most of those tactics. The improvised fix reached formal attention in December when an inspector saw the mirrors during a routine check. Officers debated the violation versus the life-saving benefits. Unauthorized equipment modification clashed with battlefield necessity. In January 1945, an evaluation team from Aberdeen Proving Ground arrived. Officers and civilian ballistics experts who studied the mirrors interviewed men, measured how much peripheral awareness the device provided. Their conclusion was unequivocal. The mirror increased survivability and should be standardized, but with proper engineering, manufactured reflectors, brackets, and training, rather than taped shaving mirrors. Bureaucracy moved slowly. The evaluators' report recommended a redesigned peripheral sight system for sniper rifles and suggested Ordnance develop purpose-built mounts. Their paper framed the idea as a formal solution discovered by the testing team. Donovan's name never appeared in the official paperwork. Captain Robert Hayes of the battalion tried to ensure Donovan's contribution was recorded, but reports and letters were swallowed by red tape and lost in the shuffle. When an officer offered Donovan the chance to file a complaint, he refused. He did not want credit. He wanted to know men would keep returning home. Recognition mattered less than survival. The mirror's practical legacy spread beyond that battalion. Some snipers improvised with polished metal, shards of glass, or chrome. The exact materials didn't matter as long as they reflected the rear arc. By late 1944, German snipers increasingly avoided engaging American teams in Metz. Their tactical advantage, surprise from flanking shots, had been neutralized by a small, cheap device. Donovan remained at the front through the end of the European War, surviving 11 months of combat and finishing with 47 confirmed kills. He credited the mirror with saving him at least 6 times. Martinez survived too, leaving the service to become a police officer in Houston. He kept a photograph of Donovan's Springfield with the mirror on his desk for decades and called his old comrade every November 3rd to give thanks. Wilson lived to be a hunting guide in Montana. He claimed 31 confirmed kills and often told clients the story of the mirror that had kept him alive through engagements no ordinary rifle sight could have warned him about. Official histories and training manuals later credited improved optics and tactical changes for better sniper survivability. But the field innovation born in Metz was largely absent from early official accounts. It wasn't until 1987 that a military historian found maintenance logs referencing improvised mirrors and traced the practice back to Private First Class Michael Donovan. The researcher tracked down veterans, interviewed Martinez and Wilson, and eventually found Donovan living quietly in Pennsylvania at 67 years old. When the historian asked why Donovan had risked punishment to modify his rifle, the answer was simple. He could not stand watching friends die. The historian's article, published in 1989 in a military history journal, credited Donovan and reached a small but passionate readership: veterans, scholars, and history buffs. Donovan received a handful of letters from snipers who had used the mirror, from widows who found solace in knowing someone had tried to save their husbands, small tokens of recognition decades after the fact. Captain Hayes visited Donovan in 1992. They reminisced for hours about Metz, the men they'd lost, and the lives saved because of a taped mirror and a willingness to break rules in the name of survival. Donovan never sought fame. He returned home after the war, worked in a factory for 35 years, married, raised 3 children, and rarely spoke of the battlefield or the mirror that had changed so much. When he died on June 7, 2001, at 79, his obituary noted his wartime service, but not the field modification that had preserved dozens of lives. At his small funeral, a handful of men whom he had never known personally, snipers saved by the mirror years earlier, introduced themselves to his family to tell them what he had done. Fragments of his story survive in the National Archives, maintenance entries, sparse interview transcripts, and a single paragraph in a book on battlefield improvisations. If you visit the Infantry Museum at Fort Benning today, you can see an M1903 Springfield from World War II fitted with a crude 4x6 mirror taped to the scope. Museum label, Field Modification, late 1944. The placard does not name Donovan, but the artifact stands as the most tangible trace of the small change that altered sniper tactics in Europe. That is how many wartime innovations occur, not in committees or laboratories, but in torn buildings and ruined towns where a soldier sees a problem and improvises a solution with what he has. Donovan's mirror was not glamorous. It was simple, ugly, and life-saving. Everything a practical wartime innovation should be. For Martinez, Wilson, Hayes, and dozens of others, that taped mirror mattered more than any medal. It was the thing that kept them alive to come home. The official record would eventually adopt the principle, but by then the personal stories of the men who made it happen had mostly faded. When the historian's article appeared, Donovan received letters from men who had never had the chance to thank him. One writer called to say the mirror had saved his life twice. Another letter came from a widow whose husband had been a sniper in Metz. She had never learned about the mirrors until that article. It gave her a measure of peace to know more had been done to save him. Hayes had tried for years to secure formal recognition for Donovan. He filed reports, wrote letters, and lobbied. But institutional attention was limited by bureaucracy and the passage of time. Donovan, however, did not care about recognition. He cared about the men he'd served beside, those who came home, and those who did not. The mirror's story matters because it reminds us that small acts of ingenuity can ripple outward, saving lives, changing doctrine, and altering the course of tactics in war. Today, sniper optics are far more advanced, with wider fields of view and supplemental sensor systems. Few remember that a scrap of mirror taped to a Springfield helped inspire the change. Donovan's name is not carved in textbooks, but his action survives in museum glass, in maintenance logs, and in the memories of men who lived because he refused to be passive. That quiet, stubborn refusal to accept needless death is the essence of battlefield invention. Someone sees a problem, improvises a fix, and refuses to wait for permission when lives are at stake. Michael Donovan's life after war was ordinary in many ways. Factory shifts, family dinners, quiet evenings. The crafting of a civilian life after years of violence. But every November 3rd, a man in Houston and a guide in Montana remembered him by phone call and story. And for a few minutes each year, the battlefield came back into focus for them. The historian's article in 1989 reached a modest audience, but for those readers it resurrected a forgotten chapter of practical innovation and human compassion. Museums, small journals, and veterans groups preserved fragments. The official Army histories never quite told Donovan's story in full. but the pieces exist for those who seek them. The Springfield in Fort Benning's exhibits is labeled as a type study, with the mirror noted as a field modification common in late 1944, anonymous but meaningful. Donovan rarely spoke of his deeds. Modesty and the passage of time made him reluctant to claim ownership of what he saw simply as necessary. Yet the men who survived because of that mirror, the quiet beneficiaries of one soldier's decision, carried his legacy forward in their own ways. On the memorial days when snipers and marksmen gather, on the quiet lists of battlefield innovations, the taped mirror finds a small measure of remembrance. Michael Donovan lived with the knowledge that he had changed the odds for many, and for him that was reward enough. If this story moved you, remember that history is full of such small, human acts that never make the front page, but save lives all the same. The mirror in the museum does not shout for attention. It sits there, humble, a rectangle of glass taped to a soldier's scope, and it tells the truest part of the story. That truth is not the glory of medals, but the sober reality of men who improvise, who make choices under pressure to keep others alive. Donovan was not a hero in any official proclamation. He was a man who refused to watch friends die when he could do something about it. His modification became doctrine in small ways, through testing and adoption, but the credit, for a long time, remained anonymous. History eventually caught up, not with headlines but with an article, a few letters, a museum tag, and the memory of those who survived. The men Donovan saved, Martinez, Wilson, and dozens more, lived out their lives with the quiet gratitude of those who owe a second chance to another's quick thinking. If you value these forgotten stories, like, subscribe, and share this one. Remember Michael Donovan. A taped mirror, a borrowed idea from a shaving kit, and a life saved because someone chose to act.